Колеги, доброго дня.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. We continue our work. It's my pleasure to invite the researcher representing European Forum Ukraine. She is the executive director, Ms. Galya Akerman. My request to you, please, don't forget to ask questions in Russian because this briefing is going to be in Russian. Thank you. Good afternoon. I would like to share some of my observations, some of my thoughts with you, and I would like to share my opinion. I believe that today the Russian elite has become totally non-transparent, and we found out that making an attempt to understand what's going on in reality in Kremlin and around Kremlin, we have to make some observations, analysis, and put forward some speculations about it. I would start from the Greek crisis because what happened there was of crucial importance. But before Greek crisis, I would like to mention the economic situation in Russia. The political and economic horizons in Russia are very cloudy. The oil price not just sharply dropped, but moreover, many observers believe that this trend will preserve in nearest future, and even the current price at the level of $55 per 1 barrel of Brent oil will decrease even further because of the deepening crisis in China, because of the new discovered oil and gas fields. For example, recently a huge field was discovered in Egypt. That's why the major items bringing revenues to the Russian budget will shrink over and over. Moreover, there are several other negative cases. There is a pending case with Boeing, and we can easily predict what will be final opinion of the investigation committee. There will be negative decision about the Donetsk militants who shot down the Boeing and their Kremlin protectors, and the second is the UCAS case. That is, Russia is violating all possible international norms in terms of Boeing, in terms of UCAS, in terms of Crimea, Donbass, etc. There are some arrested assets in Germany. There is the effect of sanctions. In result of this, Russia experiences budget deficit, inability to borrow abroad. There is a sharp drop in the foreign direct investment during the last year. They dropped twice. There are decrease in incomes of the Russian banks, and the economic situation is as follows: that with each coming day for Putin, it becomes more and more difficult to stick with that pact which he silently concluded with his population. the pact was as follows: we rule and you live better. If the living standards won't go up, maybe the majority of population will bear it somehow, especially when this is accompanied by rhetoric that we are bringing back what belongs to us, etc. You can play this game with the minor classes, but the middle class and the elites are not prepared to this life, and in spite of the revolution from the bottom of the society, we may expect for the discontent of the middle class, of elites, which might try to change the political crisis. Now, that's the right moment to mention the Greek crisis. For me, it looked very representative and very symbolic, so to say. The German newspaper Bild has published a story that Varoufakis, before coming to power in Greece, was in very close contact with the pro-Kremlin Institute of Strategic Research, which existed under the auspice of the president, and this institute was very closely preoccupied with the schemes how to bring Syriza to power, and there in mid 1990s the Russian foreign policy has shown its course towards dissolution of the European Union, and they wish to establish several pro-Russian or pro-socialist regimes in some several European countries, and thus the plan called Grexit, that is Greek's exit from the United States, from the European Union, was launched. If the pro-Syriza or Syriza's party would gain power, then the Greece would separate from the European Union. Varoufakis had very close contacts with Putin personally, and he visited him several times. And actually, some part of the government, Syriza, etc., they were preparing to make a coup. They wished to arrest the CEO of the Greek central bank. They planned to invade the bank and start to print Greek drachms. So this would mean the total turn of the Greek course. With this aim, and with this aim, Tsipras had announced the referendum. The referendum had shown what was expected by Tsipras, by Fazanis, etc. They called people to vote against the European measures. And what happened at the end of the day? The referendum results were announced the same day, and the next day, Putin's plan had to be introduced. But what happened next day? Tsipras accepted all the conditions of the European Union, even at more severe basis. What has happened? And here these are different interpretations. Whether Tsipras, whether it was Putin who promised to pay 10 billion euros to the Greece, to the new Greece government to launch that scenario, which had been envisaged from the very beginning. I believe that it was personally Putin, because nobody in Russia would dare to develop such a scenario for European policy without Putin's participation. But those 10 billion euros were not delivered to Greece, and this defeated the plan. And now the question, what had happened, why Putin haven't provided that 10 billion? And this allows us to make some assumptions and analyze some well-known facts. Between the moment when Grexit plan was developed and a possible dissolution of the European Union was designed, so to say, and between the actual moment when the scenario begin begin its implementation, the economic decline had started in Russia, and the result of sanctions appeared to be very sensitive. And one more important factor, China's economy started to decline, and the devaluation of yuan and at the moment of Greek crisis, the yuan was not so much devaluated, but the commodity goods turnover were shrunk considerably. The oil prices contributed its share, and Putin's stake over China and the and firm belief that China is a monumental, rock-hard, reliable partner. That's why those economists in Russia, like Kudrin, etc., they simply made the calculation that in case of the disaster with Grexit, this won't be not just a crucial blow over Europe, this will be a crucial blow over Russia, because in Russia there are huge European investments, real estate, etc. And experienced Captain Putin has changed the course of his flagship, and put an end to the plans of that Greek collates. And this was a symbolic, very symbolic and very manifesting moment. The second very symbolic moment, probably you have paid your attention that during referendum in Crimea, it was visited by so-called observers representing ultra-right or ultra-left parties from Europe. That is, political establishment in the Western countries, not to mention human rights activists, organizations, etc. While this summer, a delegation of French MPs visit Crimea. They are not from ultra-right parties, but these are members of the Sarkozy's party. And in parallel, Sarkozy starts to support Russia in parallel with this. Simultaneously, the right hand of Sarkozy in Parliament, Nadine Morano, establishes the group, which is not a parliamentary faction yet, but nevertheless, this is the group supporting Russia and promoting a removal of sanctions. And in France, which is the most familiar to me among European stance, and this had become the continuous campaign of Republicans Party, which is the party of Sarkozy, and Russia always had the KGB or FSB tactics, and they tried several scenarios simultaneously, launching them one by one and trying the most successful one. I think that they have changed the scenario. What does it mean, Marine Le Pen? Marine Le Pen sets her objective exit from the European Union, because the concept of the ultra-right is the Europe of nations without Schengen zone, etc. This scenario is even more disastrous for the European Union if France exits the EU. This is the Grexit in cubic dimension. And we observe how Putin rejected from support of Marine Le Pen, and instead of this, he is supporting classical right party. Sarkozy supported the transfer of Mistral. Sarkozy supports removal of sanctions. That is, Putin has made his stakes on more moderate allies. These are those who do not wish to exit from the EU, but who want to have business as usual with Russia, allegedly because this is mutually beneficial. And one more sign for me proving the change in Putin's course. This is new appearance of Medvedev. Probably you have noticed that when Putin was re-elected and again elected to the presidential post, Medvedev, who had been in power for a long period of time, he immediately disappeared from the political arena. Nothing was mentioned about him in mass media during all this period of time. And in August, they together appear in Sochi in the focus of attention of mass media. And you might recollect from Soviet times that Kremlinologists tried to analyze the situation in Kremlin, observing the signs who stands next to Kim at the Lenin's mausoleum. If you look at the pictures from Sochi, you immediately observe that Medvedev is bigger than Putin, and which is not true in reality, because Putin is naturally bigger than Medvedev. This might look funny, but I think that part of Kremlin elite, which does not wish the Russia to collapse, to reach the economic deadlock. This Kremlin elite tries to find new leverage. Putin tries to put forward some acceptable elite, and Medvedev, when he was in power, was seen as acceptable political figure in Russia, and now I have a feeling that the ceasefire in Donbass, putting forward more liberal political figure, more liberal Medvedev, who is associated with Skolkovo, with IT's development, etc., and shifting from support of ultra-left and ultra-right parties and strengthening relations with the right-wing establishment. These are puzzles of the same policy. This is the parts of the new project to prove that the Russian elite is the one with whom one could have reliable contacts or build up reliable contacts. Although I do not hope that for the second time they won't be able to promote Medvedev so far. Sergei Malarchuk, Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Would you please express your personal vision, whether in long-term, in short-term perspective, the situation in Russian economy, how it may develop, and could you please comment on the Moscow Stock Exchange? Trade in Moscow Stock Exchange is suspended. As for the perspectives, I think that the perspective is rather grave, because all the economists suggest that Russia lacks industrial capacity to carry out import substitution, especially in terms of medical technologies. They did not do any pharmaceutical research developments during the last years. The prices of oil and gas won't go up in nearest future. They stop the trading in Moscow Stock Exchange because of falling exchange rate of ruble, and when I hear that the oil may drop up to $20 per barrel, and in this case $1 will cost 100 rubles, this is a disastrous scenario. The regions lack money drastically. The more mortality rate had grown considerably. The Ministry of Finance opposed a correlation between the level of pensions and salaries to the exchange rate, because they understand that the only way out in this situation is to allow ruble to fall down, but to allow the exchange rate to fall down. But they try to preserve this correlation in exchange rate. The flow of Russian tourists abroad has shrink twice. I believe that only some disastrous scenario implemented in the Middle East might give rise to the oil price, and they say that by 2017 they will exhaust all their reserve funds.
Thank you very much. Next, Ukrainian Media Center. In Ukraine, on 4th September, the news that Gazprom has signed a contract for the second line of Northern Stream was a shocking news. Isn't that one of the signs that Putin's elite will be forgiven and accepted back in European elites? You know, we had a chain of situation when we expected that, for instance, we had first Southern Stream, next Turkish Stream, all of that measures, they were protective or limitative, so to say, for transit of gas through Ukraine. Now they signed second version of Northern Stream, but I believe that there will be certain problems with anti-monopolic regulations. Again, higher investments with lower prices, not that it is needed. So I will wait with all the estimates before this pipeline will make true. Of course, in Western world there are very important business circles that are interested in that processes and investments into Russia. But as you know, investment in Russia, this is kind of a roulette game, because you may earn tremendous money, or you can lose everything because of lack of proper justice. And the example of UCAS, it's very illustrative, because not only the company was taken off and bankrupted, but even the international court could not get money from Russia. So I would not make any estimates now. I would wait, rather. One more question from Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. The economical situation in Russia, of course, depends on the sanctions. And last words from Holland that, of course, the escalation on the east will lead to milder sanctions. Doesn't it mean that France has already forgot Crimean issue? You know, I believe that if we manage to stop military assistance to Donbass from Russia and take over the border control over the border of Ukraine, which is prescribed by Minsk negotiations, of course certain sanctions could be lifted. Certain sanctions against Crimea will still be in place, against Crimean physical and legal persons, but in that case the sanctions will be of regional or local nature. The matter is that in order to do that, Russia must be in even more complicated situation because the world community was very of a very high grade of irritation, and you remember there was a rhetorics where certain lexics based on Novorossiya term. Now we have Donbass, and the Donbass remains Donbass, and I believe that it is not very promising that Russia stick to Minsk agreements, and I believe unless Russia stops its assistance to Donbass, military assistance, then no sanctions will be lifted. Again, if Sarkozy will be back again as a president, and hopefully he will not, then the policy will be changed. The same situation is with Merkel. She is pressed by business circles hardly, but she's still withstanding that. Maybe a couple of words on Syria issue. You know, of course, Russia always supported Assad. It's not only an issue of the military bases and presence in Mediterranean area, but this is an issue of certain personal belief of Putin into Assad. Because when it was Gaddafi and Hussein, this story was translated as something that could be applied to Putin himself, and this is again the support, military support to Assad from Putin's side. Thus, Putin increases Russia's presence in Egypt, and there were a lot of large contract signs. So the contracts means that the situation provides for Syria's next failure, and Putin's accomplices, so to say, or aliens, they are not in a very good position. Not only Venezuela that is depressed deeply, Brazil is in a deep crisis as well, and again, Chinese card hasn't been played. Finally, that's why I understand that, and of course the USA will be his enemy. So once again, Putin should conquer Europe again. I believe it will be his stake, and as well his stake will be put over Syria as a mean of blackmailing the West. Thank you very much. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center would be glad to see you again. Our next briefing, Colonel Andrei Lysenko, will start in several minutes. Thank you.